What if some of the darkest chapters in modern history were hidden not by enemies, but by the very governments sworn to protect their own people? Across the world, shocking events were buried beneath classified documents. Destroyed records, official denials, and decades of carefully controlled silence that discouraged anyone from asking difficult questions. Many of these stories were dismissed as conspiracy theories until declassified files, survivor testimonies, and historical investigations gradually revealed that at least part of the unimaginable truth had actually happened. From secret human experiments to forgotten massacres and policies that destroyed countless innocent lives, these hidden histories continue shaping how nations remember, defend, or question their own past today. As we uncover these disturbing secrets from different countries, one unsettling question remains: how many hidden truths are still waiting behind locked archives that the public has never been allowed to see? Every nation carries moments of triumph that become part of its identity. But some chapters are buried, because remembering them raises uncomfortable questions about power and responsibility. During the turbulent decades of the Second World War and the Cold War, governments across the world claimed that extraordinary threats demanded extraordinary measures, beyond normal public oversight. Behind closed doors, intelligence agencies, military organizations, and political leaders launched secret programs that were hidden from the citizens they were meant to protect. Many of these operations remained invisible because official documents were classified, witnesses were silenced, and anyone questioning the official story often faced ridicule or intimidation. One of the most controversial examples emerged in the United States through a classified intelligence project known as Project MKUltra. Created during the height of Cold War fears, the program sought new methods of interrogation, psychological control, and human behavior manipulation against perceived enemies. Thousands of people, including students, hospital patients, prisoners, and ordinary civilians, reportedly became unwilling participants in experiments without their informed consent. Some subjects received powerful psychoactive drugs, while others endured hypnosis, prolonged isolation, or severe sleep deprivation in carefully monitored tests. For years, officials denied that such experiments had ever taken place, allowing rumours and speculation to circulate without clear answers. When previously classified records were finally released decades later, they confirmed that at least part of the program had been real, although countless documents had already been destroyed. Across the Atlantic, another hidden chapter was unfolding under Nazi Germany, long before the Holocaust reached its full scale. The program, known as Action T4, targeted people with physical and mental disabilities after they were falsely labelled as lives considered unworthy by the regime. Victims were removed from hospitals and care institutions, transported in sealed vehicles, and systematically killed in facilities designed to conceal the crimes. Although officials publicly claimed the program had ended after growing criticism, the killings quietly continued through different methods until the war drew to a close. Historians now recognise Action T4 as an important step that helped establish techniques later used during the Holocaust on a far greater scale. At nearly the same time, another secret operation was expanding far beyond Germany, inside territories occupied by Imperial Japan. Hidden behind the appearance of a scientific research centre, Unit 731 became one of history's most horrifying sites of human experimentation. Prisoners of war and civilians were exposed to biological weapons, deliberate infections, freezing temperatures, and other brutal experiments that ignored every principle of medical ethics. After the war ended, much of the evidence disappeared, leaving survivors and historians struggling for decades to reconstruct what had truly happened. These three cases reveal a disturbing pattern in which secrecy, fear, and unchecked authority repeatedly allowed unimaginable crimes to remain hidden long after they had already changed countless lives. As investigators dug deeper into hidden government archives, they discovered that secrecy was not limited to a single nation, but appeared repeatedly across different political systems. One of the clearest examples emerged in the forests near Katyn, where thousands of Polish military officers, intellectuals, and prisoners disappeared without explanation during the Second World War. For decades, Soviet authorities blamed Nazi Germany, while families searching for answers were threatened into silence, and official records remained tightly controlled. Even after mounting international evidence challenged the official narrative, the Soviet government refused to accept responsibility until decades later. When the truth was finally acknowledged, the admission answered some questions, but left many others unresolved, because countless documents had vanished forever. Nearly half a century later, another defining moment unfolded in the heart of Beijing, as students and ordinary citizens gathered to demand political reform and greater freedoms. What began as peaceful demonstrations gradually transformed into one of the most controversial political crises in modern Chinese history. Military forces entered the capital. Gunfire echoed through the streets, and armoured vehicles advanced as the protests were forcefully suppressed. Images captured by foreign journalists reached audiences around the world, creating one of the most recognisable symbols of political resistance in the 20th century. Inside China, however, strict censorship ensured that later generations would encounter only carefully approved accounts, while many details remained absent from public discussion. A different form of silence surrounded the Algerian War, where years of colonial conflict exposed civilians and soldiers alike to extraordinary levels of violence. French military forces were accused of systematic torture, mass arrests, and extrajudicial executions, while armed insurgents also carried out deadly attacks against civilian targets. For many years, official language avoided describing the conflict as a full-scale war, delaying public recognition of its human cost. Survivors, historians, and former soldiers continue presenting evidence that challenged the government's earlier version of events. Decades later, France gradually acknowledged the use of torture, although debates over responsibility and historical memory remain deeply divided. Another tragedy unfolded far from the battlefield when famine devastated Bengal during the global turmoil of the Second World War. Failed harvests, wartime disruptions, and controversial colonial policies combined to create one of the deadliest humanitarian disasters of the 20th century. Historians continue debating the extent to which government decisions worsened the catastrophe, ensuring that responsibility remains a subject of lasting controversy. Despite their different settings and political systems, each of these cases reveals how information can be controlled long after violence itself has ended. Together they demonstrate that when records disappear, witnesses are silenced, and uncomfortable questions are ignored, the struggle for historical truth can continue for generations. Although these hidden chapters unfolded in different countries and under different governments, they all left behind consequences that continue shaping national debates today. In Australia, thousands of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children were forcibly removed from their families under policies presented as protection but designed to erase Indigenous identity. Many children grew up separated from their language and relatives, creating trauma that extended across multiple generations long after the policies officially ended. The Australian government eventually issued a formal apology, yet many Indigenous communities argue that acknowledgement alone cannot fully repair the lasting damage. Canada faced a remarkably similar legacy through its residential school system, where Indigenous children were removed from their homes in an effort to eliminate their cultural traditions. Survivors described years of emotional, physical, and psychological abuse, while countless families never learned what happened to children who never returned home. The discovery of unmarked graves near former school sites forced the country to confront painful evidence that many Canadians had never fully understood. Public apologies and truth commissions marked important milestones, but many Indigenous leaders continue calling for greater accountability and meaningful reconciliation. In Brazil, another hidden chapter emerged after the military dictatorship that ruled the country for more than 2 decades in the name of national security. Political opponents were imprisoned, tortured, exiled, or disappeared, while strict censorship prevented many citizens from learning the full extent of government repression. Even after democracy returned, debates continued between those who viewed the period as one of stability and those who remembered it primarily through the suffering of its victims. India's Bhopal disaster revealed that not every national tragedy begins with war, intelligence agencies, or political ideology, because corporate negligence can produce equally devastating consequences. A deadly gas leak transformed an ordinary night into one of the worst industrial disasters in history, leaving thousands dead and hundreds of thousands facing lifelong health problems. Survivors spent decades demanding justice, arguing that compensation, environmental cleanup, and corporate accountability never matched the scale of the catastrophe. South Africa presents another complex example through its secret nuclear weapons program developed during the apartheid era under conditions of extreme political isolation. Before the transition to democracy, the government dismantled its nuclear arsenal, becoming the only nation to voluntarily eliminate weapons it had successfully built. Some observers describe that decision as an important act of responsibility, while others argue the program reflected the desperation of a deeply unjust political system. These different histories demonstrate that every nation carries difficult memories shaped by fear, conflict, discrimination, secrecy, or the pursuit of power. Understanding these events does not require condemning entire countries, but it does require acknowledging that historical progress begins with an honest examination of the past. The greatest lesson may be that forgotten histories rarely disappear forever, because sooner or later, the search for truth returns, asking questions that no government can permanently silence. Every nation prefers to celebrate its greatest victories, yet history often remembers them just as much for the truths they once tried to bury. The stories we explored reveal that secrecy, denial, and delayed accountability have appeared across very different governments, ideologies, and periods of modern history. While many facts have now been confirmed through investigations, declassified records, and survivor testimony, countless questions remain unanswered because evidence disappeared or was deliberately destroyed. Perhaps the greatest lesson is that confronting the darkest chapters of history does not weaken a nation, but strengthens its commitment to truth, justice, and future generations. As long as sealed archives remain unopened and forgotten voices continue waiting to be heard, the next hidden chapter of history may already exist, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it.